over and above the employment agreement. And normally employees sign that without appreciating the exact implications of that form. So in the file, we could retrieve the form, which was signed way back in 1984. When this was presented to the employee, he just had to calm down and say, okay, now let's agree how we handle this matter. Importance of having proper terms of engagement and in employment contract to put specific terms on how issues of intellectual property will be addressed. Then the IP, institutional IP audit will also provide a picture on the institutional risk and potentials with regard to IP which has been acquired from third party. This is connected to FTO assignment. Do we have a proper clearance of using IP which are controlled or owned by a third party? Because certain equipment may come, we may procure or purchase equipment with IP caveats, IP restrictions. So it's important also for those who are dealing with procurement to make sure that when they procure, they specify in the procurement agreement in terms of the obligation of the supplier to make sure that he undertakes to clear or IP-related rights of third parties, which may potentially be connected to the equipment which is procured by the institution. How about IP generated internally by researchers? How the process and procedures of handling it, the IP audit will identify and point out whether there is a need to strengthen some of the procedures and steps, and also IP used with a potential of third-party caveat or third-party IP restrictions. The IP audit also identifies potential partners in developing certain IP and innovation. That's why I said this is a very important assignment or exercise which can be done at the institution, because it points out that with these potential IP which we have within our institution, who are the likely partners who might be interested in the market, industry, or we call it private sector. And that is a very important revelation, because protection of intellectual property on its own does not guarantee commercial success or utilization of that intellectual property right. It's important from the very early stages to identify who are the potential collaborating institutions or partners to develop that IP into a product, a service in a manner that will bring benefit to the institution. It also provides useful information for developing institutional IP strategy. We've got this saying, we say, if you can't measure it, you can't protect it. If you can't measure it, you can't protect it. So the IP audit essentially helped the institution to gauge, measure its capability in terms of handling variety of issues relating to IP management. So it's a crucial document, a crucial report, which will be very instrumental in terms of devising the strategies. Now you have all the information, the fact-finding report. So what are you going to do at the institution? What are you going to plan in order to make use of such information, such IP information? So it's important in developing the institutional IP strategies. I don't know how many institutions here have got the IP audit report and IP strategy, but if it is not, maybe this is a wake-up call to check. And you may start from a very simple IP audit report. Then you may do it after every 5 years to check. You expand the scope of the IP audits, and in that way you'll be able to get to know the exact issues and context in which intellectual property can be attended within your institution. Then comes the IP identification. This is a collaborative process. Who are involved? Researchers who are doing the groundwork. They are very important because these are the persons who have the technical information about all the research outputs. Then administrators, you may call it IP officers, IP managers, or IP attorneys or the legal counsel of the institution will be involved, administrators. This is where we mentioned about and why we mentioned about the need for having the institutional processes and instruments. And the administrators will be responsible to administer such instruments like the invention disclosure or IP disclosure form. Then the application process with the national IP offices. Then the other important player in the collaboration process is the potential users. There could be various potential users. How you engage with them will determine how successful a utilization or commercialization process will be. The identification starts at the very beginning of conceptualizing a research problem. I've seen in many cases, researchers make a mistake. They want until a final product comes out. That is a very risky process. Intellectual property operates on a system which is essentially based on fast come, fast served. So time is always of essence. And that's why there is an allowance of doing what we call a preliminary application, particularly in the context of patents. So it's important to start the process of identifying the potential IP from the very beginning when the concept is developed, research concept. What informs a researcher of the problem to investigate? Why the researcher wants to do particular research? What is the problem which they want to address? And it's very important to consult with the industry. We've got this phraseology that universities are operating as ivory towers. We tend to think that we know each and everything. We can think of a problem. We can also come up with a solution. That's a big mistake if we want to have a thriving relationship with the industry. So it's crucial and advisable to consult with the industry at the very preliminary stage. And that's why we need to have also this what we call industrial attachments for our researchers and staff, at least to understand from the industrial point of view, market point of view, what are the issues which need to be taken on board. Yesterday, there was a mention of consulting patent database, a very important process. And I know some of the universities and the research institutions have put a requirement that in order for your research proposal on a scientific or technological area to be approved, you have also to attach a patent search report, at least to indicate you have checked the state of art in the current innovation and invention, the world of invention. So patent search is a very important process for researchers because it opens up their mind in terms of what has been done by others and what can be done by a researcher in order to make a progression. I always like to use this example of a giant and a dwarf, how patents operate, a giant and a dwarf. A patent database operates or functions like a giant. Now, if a giant and a dwarf stands on the equal level, obvious, the one will be better off to see far ahead is the giant, the one who is taller than the dwarf. But what happens if you take a dwarf and place on the shoulder of the giant? Who will be better off? The dwarf will be better off than the giant. So it's like patent database functions like a giant. You take a researcher who, for illustration purposes, we regard as a dwarf with the limited information, then avail him this gigantic base of scientific information to check the state of the art. Then he'll be better off to see better solutions, to come up with a better outcome. And that is the function of the patent database. So it's very important during the identification process to consult the patent database because it will guarantee to a larger extent that the outcome of research could be making a breakthrough research. It will not be regarded within the patent terms as a prior art, knowledge which is already known in the relevant field. So we should avoid to formulate problems and thinking that what we think is the problem in the industry. because then we are going to have a problem when it comes to utilization or commercialization. So any preliminary signs of potential IP arising out of research projects should be acted promptly. As I've said, time is of essence. Patents operate on a first come, first served. The date of filing is one of the critical dates in the patent application. Once the potentials have been identified, it's important to sign what we call the IP disclosure form. These are the instruments I mentioned that the institution must have specified designated instruments like the IP disclosure form. Also discuss the potential uses of the invention with the researcher, with the industry, carry out a preliminary market survey. What purpose, what value this invention will bring in the market, taking into account the state of affairs in a particular market. Assess its market potential vis-a-vis cost of protection. So it's important also to look at it because intellectual property protection is always a strategic decision. There is a cost to it. I mentioned yesterday, I was reacting to one of the presentation that when the institution own IP, they also take responsibility to pay for maintenance fee, surveillance fee. So a decision to go for a patent protection or IP protection should be based on a strategic decision that this will bring value, whether you call it in monetary term or social terms, but this need to be addressed from a strategic point of view. Weigh all the options which are available. In some cases, it may not be worth it to go for a patent. Maybe you go for protection through confidential information, trade secret. It's another way of protecting invention or scientific or certain proprietary information with a commercial value. Assess its true cost, the cost of drafting, cost of filing, cost of maintenance. We mentioned yesterday about payment of annuity. The application, once filed, must be maintained, certain prescribed fees, and these are determined based on the national regulations. Evaluate the effectiveness of the protection and enforcement. That's why we mentioned about the strategic decisions. In some cases, it may be advisable not to go for protection because of the lack of enforcement or effective enforcement system in a particular jurisdiction. So it may not be worth incurring costs when you cannot enforce the rights. So I need to check also how effective the current regulatory framework and enforcement process is. We now move to protection of IP. There are a variety of forms depending on the nature of IP. Certain types of creative works may attract protection of patents, some trademarks. The other time I was talking with another audience and I asked, should universities be interested with the trademarks? So this is a business where universities are not doing business. I said, no, we're talking about branding, institutional branding. So it's important also for the university. And I've seen some universities are also selling products. So they have to look at issues of trademark protection seriously. Copyrights, publications which are coming out of the universities in the form of published journal articles, books, and other forms of publications and other artistic creative works, industrial designs in the engineering design. So all these have got defined statutory framework depending on the applicable principles under national law. Protection involves a process. One needs to understand and appreciate. The process entails what? You lodge the application is subjected to what we call examination. There are so many cases where we have attempted to file a patent and have got in the patent office people who are called examiners. In the universities, we do examine, but once we invent and file an application, there are those people in the national patent offices or national IP offices or regional IP offices called patent examiners. Or even a trademark, when you file, it will undergo through examination. Examination checking on what? Merit of the claimed IP rights. Merit. So they use the law to assess and benchmark whether the application qualifies. It's a process. For a patent, it may take up to 2 years to get a patent if a proper examination is done. So it's important also to prepare researchers with this mindset. It's not a plug and play that you file the patent application today, then next week or after a month you get. There is a process which will have to be followed. And also the scope of protection differs under each type of intellectual property. Some of these rights expire after a particular period of time, like patents. In most countries, the maximum you can get is 20 years. Patents. Copyright, it depends on the applicant, the owner. If it's a natural person, life of that natural person, then it depends on the national law, whether 50 years or 70 years, depending on the law applicable in a particular country. Trademarks, you protect, you own it as long as you keep on using and renewing the application. So it's important to also appreciate the scope of rights which are associated with this IP once the protection is sought and is granted. So protection is for a limited period of time. That affects its users. So when you negotiate a patent license, for instance, the licensee will have to take interest of the remainder of duration of protection, because then that will determine the exclusive right which will be enjoyed by that licensee. One need to check on that. And I know in some cases, licensees, once they see the potential technology, they may also negotiate a license even before patent is granted. It may be complicated if at a later stage the patent is refused, but what we are emphasizing here is that the duration of protection affects its users, and consequently, this affects how we deal with it in a commercial scale or how we utilize it. I've already mentioned about the territorial principle, that the protection of intellectual property is territorial, and this affects the jurisdictional choices of the organization. For instance, if the business envisage that after certain period of time, maybe 1 year or so, they'll move to another market in another country, it's advisable to apply for intellectual property protection in those markets which they project to operate in the coming years, because protection is territorial. And they've got lots of cases now emerging within East Africa where owners, different owners, same IP rights. Now, when it's come to cross-border business, then issues of legal disputes erupt. So that's why we say one need to look at the choices and strategic projection of the company or organization in terms of its sphere of operation. Important also payment of annuities, as already saying. Now, the final point is on utilization or commercialization of IP. I already mentioned this, that a mere protection of IP does not guarantee commercial success. Rather, for a commercial success to take place, it requires, number one, proper institutional planning. From the very beginning, as I've said, when the concept is being developed, try to identify who are the potential users. And these users may inform in terms of the research direction or areas to focus during the research process in order to come up with the finding which will be supportive and not disruptive. A finding which is compatible to what is already going on in a particular industrial setting. Number two, proper understanding of the market needs and dynamics. Market needs and dynamics. It depends on the what we call market choices. If we're talking about a product to be sold, who are the targeted segments in the market? Is it youth? Are we talking about elderly people? What are their choices? How about gender dimensions? Is this product meant for women? And how this will inform the creative process, the design and everything. So it's important to understand the market needs and dynamics, because ultimately this will influence many other creative contribution or inputs which will result into the final product or process. Proper identification of partners. This is very important, because you have to appreciate that from the very beginning, you know who are the people you are likely to deal with, who are likely to be attracted with a particular invention or IP rights. And once you do that at an earlier stage, it will be advantageous to the institution, because it will be easier then to identify who will be the partner to develop that IP right into a product or service. Continuous technical and other support to make it successful. It's not a one-off dealing when we are talking about utilization and commercialization of intellectual property. In most cases, what is coming out from the universities could be very raw. It needs a bit of refinements, testing, realignment, so that it can fit in a typical production process. So there might be a need for continuous technical support. That need to be factored in. And this can be very expensive if it takes a longer period of time. I've seen in some licensing or assignment agreement, they specify the level of service which will be free as a technical service. And once you exceed that level, then additional payment may be attracted. So it's a question of negotiating the arrangement. In terms of the options for commercialization, there are several, or utilization. One can decide to use the IP by himself or herself, the institution, used by the developer. Number two, the other option is licensing. Now, under licensing, we have subcategories which need to be understood in their own respect. Do you go for exclusive license? What are the implications of opting for exclusive license? What does it mean to the institution? How about non-exclusive licensing? What are the options, implications when you negotiate fee, if you go for exclusive or non-exclusive? How about cross-licensing? Cross-licensing normally takes place when it's like a barter trade, that I give you my IP rights, which is complementary to you. And in return, you also give me the permission to use your IP right, which is complementary on my side. So we call it cross-licensing. It depends on the circumstances and needs. The best option will be determined after assessing all the available options. Then the other option is to go for assignment. Assignment is otherwise referred to as outright sale. You part company in terms of ownership. Licensing, the institution, licensor, keeps the ownership, but permits the licensee to do certain prescribed or stated activities. Assignment, the institution decides to sell. The decision whether to go for assignment or licensing will have to be guided by the institutional strategy, how the institution wants to move. The other option is a joint venturing, where you form up the startups or spin-off companies, you enter into joint venture. It's one of the way also of commercialization of intellectual property. Or the other way of using it is to place it in the public domain, public interest. We decide at the institution, particularly those which maybe are funded by the government, 100% funded. And we have seen also in other countries like South Africa, they've enacted a law on protection of intellectual property arising out of publicly financed research. Because you have used the taxpayers' money, the assumption is the taxpayers are entitled to the benefits arising out of such IP right. So in some cases, the decision may be made to protect the IP and put it in the public domain is what we call a defensive option. Because if you don't do that, other unscrupulous fellow may pick it, protect, and at some point even prohibits the very person who invented that invention to use the invention. So in some cases, placing it in the public domain could be the best option. For commercialization or utilization of IP, it's very important to have a very good team to negotiate a deal. Now, for the team to negotiate a good deal, they need to have certain key information. For instance, have a full and complete information on how useful that IP right is. How useful that IP right is. What is the contribution of that IP? Have that information. Also understand the needs of the licensee or assignee and how the IP will solve the need or the problem faced by the licensee or assignee. This is important because if you go to a negotiation table, you are sitting there and you don't have the technical and economic or commercial information about the IP rights, then it will be like a flag. You'll be just taken either side by the other side's argument. But if the negotiation team is informed in terms of how useful, from a technical point of view, that IP is to the production process of the licensee, they'll be in a better position to negotiate a good deal. Also, place value. There are various valuation methods which have been devised by these accounting firms, where you can place a specific value to a particular IP. That will aid during the negotiation process when we negotiate a license or assignment deal. Information in the IP audit reports at that stage can be very, very useful. So we have touched the three important aspects which I was asked to talk about. The identification process. You should remember the IP audit is critical during the identification process. It's very important for institutions to do that. Then protection. What are the options? Should we go for protection to start with, or adopt other means of protection, or leave the IP in the public domain? What are the important considerations which need to be taken into account before deciding a mode of protection? And then commercialization. We've got the options, but you need to strategize. Important for commercialization, our institutions need to have a competent team. The problem we are having, and this is just borrowed from my experience, we normally pick a wrong team. Not in the sense that they are not aware of the invention or the IP rights. Rather, we focus on the technical team, people who understand the technical side of the IP rights. It's good to have them, but remember, at the level of negotiation, a commercial deal, the most important information is the commercial information. So how do we repackage the technical part of the IP rights into a commercial success? That has been a big challenge in most of the commercialization deals. So you end up talking about the technical aspects. This investor or a businessman is not competent to appreciate the technical part of it. So he end up just to fail to appreciate how this can be important to his business. But if we repackage the same information and indicate it from a commercial point of view, it will make a lot of sense. And maybe the licensee, the potential licensee or assignee will be attracted to engage with the institutions. So these are my final thoughts by way of conclusion, that intellectual property are one of the important corporate or institutional organizational strategic assets. The way we deal with it affects the value we derive from it. Universities and R&D institutions are the center of the IP creation process. So it's important to also put priorities, structures, and instruments to make sure that we have a coordinated, a well-structured system to detect IP, protect, and then transact the relevant IP. Private sector, on the other side, are in the continuous drive to compete in the market. They want to remain relevant. And how do you remain relevant in the market? Is by being innovative and competitive. So we are in the two sides of the same equation. The private sector wants to be competitive. Most of them in our economic setup do not have the budget to set a research department. So they rely, or they tend to rely on research which is done by universities or R&Ds. So it's important for these two sides of the equation to read each other, appreciate each other, so that we can build a bridge. And once we are able to bridge that, the academic, public-private partnership, then we'll see the positive results in terms of how impactful intellectual property can be, not only in our universities, but in our economies as a whole. Thank you very much. Yeah. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saudin, for this very insightful presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, you'll agree with me that he has done justice to this topic on protection, utilization, and identification of intellectual property. And taking your quote that if you cannot measure it, then you cannot protect it. And that you emphasize the need to have a good deal, to negotiate a good deal so that the value of the intellectual property can be actually realized by the universities and the research institutions. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give him another round of applause for that great insight. We now come to our second part. We have a team of 4 panelists who are going to reflect on some of the issues that have been raised in this presentation. Our first panelist is Mr. Batin Niyigaba. Batin is an intellectual property expert and is a founder of Pan-African organization, which is called the IP Span Africa, which is based in Kigali. Ladies and gentlemen, join me to welcome Batin. Our second panelist is Professor Tatian Masharubu. I am trying to pronounce the name slowly so that I don't make a mistake. Titan is the Permanent Executive Secretary for the National Commission for Science and Technology and Innovation from the Republic of Burundi. You're most welcome. Our third panelist is Professor Maina Mwangi. Professor Maina is the Director of Innovation Incubation and University Industry Linkage at Kenyatta University. Professor, you're most welcome. And our last panelist is Dr. Amos Nungu. Dr. Amos Nungu is the Director General of Tanzania Commission for Science and Technology. Okay, thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, join me to welcome our panelists. We have now a complete panel to reflect on this topical issue on the protection, identification, and utilization of intellectual property. Before I invite the first panelist, allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to warmly welcome Dr. Esther Thara, the Principal Secretary for TVED from the Ministry of Education of the Republic of Kenya. Karibu sana. So I now take this opportunity to invite our first panelist, Mr. Batian. Could you please reflect on this topical issue of intellectual property? I will be very much interested, considering that you're an expert who has been handling issues and cases related to arising from intellectual property dispute. So you could also reflect to us some of these problematic issues that may arise as we identify and protect our intellectual property. Please proceed.
Thank you. I'm going to share my experience about intellectual property management based on our experience we have, especially with working with the universities as far as University of Rwanda included in their centers of excellence. Intellectual property, you can talk about research without considering intellectual property management, intellectual property protection, and intellectual property commercialization. When we talk of IP, allow me to use a word IP, which stands for intellectual property. So we cannot talk about IP without considering these forms of IP, especially for universities. We know that they always, probably, or part of their time is about patent and copyright. But also they have, as yesterday, by experience of yesterday, there was a hot topic about who can own IP in university. So, but mainly IP that formed under universities are considered as joint ownership work, because there is a part of IP, there is a part of creator and a part of university, because mostly universities are the ones that finance the IP. However, it depends on also how contracts, employment contracts, define the work scope. If your employment contract determines that what you will do under employment duties belongs to universities, meaning that all you do belongs to universities. So I'm elaborating this fact just to know why it is important also to consider about what contracts universities or university academic faculties sign. So, and also another point is about IP and universities. IP and universities. Why university need to consider having IP policy? It's just because universities and research and development organizations are the vehicles of creativity and innovation. So, as long as universities are not developing, are not taking the lead in innovation and invention, even Africa or East Africa, we are not going to have new solutions to our communities around. But remember that communities are waiting for researchers to bring solutions that reflect on the life, or daily life needs. So without delay, let me also talk about the issues and opportunities about the IP management, why it is important. IP management is a critical factor in terms of technology transfer. However, there are many issues Yesterday, I was talking about, I was asking or commenting about patent research. I'm very sure that many universities, even not universities, but Africans, we are not able, we don't know about patent search. For example, for our practice at a global, our organization is affiliate of Global Intellectual Property Alliance, but our practice is to, when we come to the university, for instance, we meet with incubation center, the cohorts that they are going to start with. We come, we meet them, and first thing we do is to give them, to lecture them an introductory course about intellectual property, IP protection, commercialization, and ownership of IP. So that why we teach that is just to facilitate them to have the understanding of IP, concept of IP. Sometimes they say, I have an innovation, but you don't know that there is a word called IP for some. So, but when we teach that course, it's also a way of trying to facilitate them to examine their innovations. Because for instance, you can see one innovation here, and when you go to Kenya, it's the same. And we are exhibiting IP, you see? So meaning that it is important factor to do a patent search. I also come again to patent search because it's a one factor that will help universities, research and development organizations to come up with new solutions, the novelty of their solutions. So without delay, I also want to provide some recommendations about this, how this thing can be done. I think, in my opinion, about this protection of IP and management of IP, my colleague here tried to elaborate. He gave us the whole package that we needed to understand in this room. But another thing I can add is that if there is a way that IUCA with their affiliates organization can structure the harmonization of patent applications, not only just to patent or to file a patent within your country. Rather, there are many different alternatives they can use, like filing on regional level, like in ARIPO, where you can file. Then from there, any university, this thing can facilitate in technology transfer. You are going to ask how? It is going to facilitate, because if the innovation from University of Rwanda is going to be, we do patent search from University of Rwanda, and we see that in Kenya, the University of Kenya implemented the same or came up with the same solution. We can think that this way, like, let's do, as long as they already did this, let's ask for the improvement, which is so that they can license University of Rwanda, then from University of Rwanda can add another innovation patent. I think that is one recommendation I can add. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin, for your very brilliant recommendation, particularly for the need for the harmonization of IP frameworks in the region. I think IUCA will take that recommendation very seriously. Let me now take this opportunity to invite Masharubu, Professor Masharubu, to make his statement. I should have negotiated at the beginning a good deal in terms of time, but now let me take this opportunity to negotiate it for the remaining panelists, that if you can take about 5 minutes to give your input, we shall appreciate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, moderator. Allow me first of all to introduce myself. Professor Tassima Sharabu is my name. I work for the National Commission for Science, Technology and Innovation, Burundi, as the permanent executive secretary. My commission was established in 2014, but its operationalization occurred in 2017 by the appointment of the first executive secretary, and the commission is mandated to promote and coordinate all science, technology, and innovation matters, of course, including IP, I mean the intellectual property. So at the country level, we have an office in charge of industrial property within the ministry, in charge of trade and the industry. And also we have another office in charge of copyright and quality rights within the ministry, in charge of youth, culture and sports. But what we have a problem, because for some of our institutions, we don't have such offices or IP policies at institutional level in sectorial agencies like higher education institute or research centers to guide activities in IP management, as well as technology transfer and the commercialization of research and development outputs, meaning that it's a big gap to be filled, and with your support and the collaboration, we will reach our goal. Also, at the county level, in terms of legal framework, we have a law in industrial property and another law for copyright and quality rights. Yeah. At that level, it's important to note that since we are dealing with IP management and traditional knowledge, and of course with cultural heritage, it is important to note that the law on industrial property does not cover all issues of traditional knowledge, innovations, and the practices in respect of Nagoya Protocol of the Convention on the Biodiversity Conservation, but it is rather limited to traditional knowledge for the sharing of benefits related to the exploitation of traditional knowledge of communities in the free fields, namely traditional medicine, agriculture, and food. So across the region and in Burundi, protection of innovation IP rights remains a challenge for most of R&D institutions and startups. So the main reason cited being the lack of proper information on IP, and also, as you saw through the presentation made by the key presenter, it takes also a long time when you intend to apply for IP rights. Also, it is highly costly for the application and also for the maintenance. So to conclude, also as a mean of recommendation, there is a great need to build the capacities and strengthen institutional and legal abilities to generate and exploit economically valuable IP assets. I believe that collaboration at national and regional level, and even beyond at international level, is the surest way of translating our research output and IP applications in practical uses. And at this level, I'm very happy that recently I chaired 2 validation workshops organized by the East African Science and Technology Commission to validate, on one hand, a regional IP policy and a regional innovation and technology transfer strategies. So partner states, once they will domesticate those management tools, I do think that IP management would be handled very well. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor, for that input, particularly the recommendation you are giving for capacity building, recognizing that some of our higher education institutions and research institutions, their capacity is low, and collaboration you have emphasized is very critical in that regard. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me now to invite our third panelist, Professor Maina Mwangi, to make his remarks. Professor, karibu.
Okay, good morning and thank you. Let me start by thanking IUCA for the opportunity to be here, and also to our speaker for this session, Dr. Saudin Mwakanje, for doing justice to this topic. I am from Kenyatta University in Kenya, and the university is sizable. We have currently 70,000 students and well over 1,500 staff who are doing stuff. About 10,000 of those students or more are postgraduates. And so we have a good mass of researchers. And so we would expect to be really seeing a lot of innovation, IP being generated. The center I am sitting in is called the Chandaria Innovation Incubation Center. This is established as a PPP, so it fits very well in the context of what we are discussing here today. It has existed since 2011. And in the recent years, we have had 30 to 40 successful companies coming out. Currently in the pipeline, we have about 60 startups. And there are also, we have many other interactions. Our model for taking in incubatees is 70% of the capacity is allocated to university staff and students, and 30% is allocated to others who are coming from outside the university. And this is the first point I would like to point out, because when we are talking of PPP, sometimes the public parties seem to be these large public corporate bodies. But there is this other group of young people with ideas, with innovations that also need to be supported, to grow them into businesses. And it's an important part of the public component I believe universities need to consider as they are well distributed in different parts of the country. In terms of identification of IP, we fairly have good, and Dr. Mwakaji has covered that. I don't want to go about. We have mechanisms to do this, but what do we see? The experience is indeed what he has said. We don't have as high disclosure as we should be having, considering the proportion or the population of researchers in our institution. This is partly attributed to what he has very well picked on, the IP policy of the institution, which is anchored on the IP Act. In Kenya, the IP Act 2001, first of all, assigns IP to the institution because this is the employer. And surprisingly, because there is an IP bill 2020, I don't know how far it has gone, repeats the same thing. And this we know now is a disincentive because researchers are investing a lot of their effort, connections and partnerships, and then they see that they are not going to be the beneficiaries of this. And what I would say is there is a need really to rethink, to reconsider how enabling these policies at a national level. I don't know whether at the regional level what would need to be done, but I believe IUCA and perhaps other actors here might be able to facilitate some kind of dialogue to have a look at this, because I think I see that we are losing more than we are gaining as a country because of this. The other thing is we have a problem in terms of where do we expect IP to come from. A lot of the research which is being done in most of our universities is externally funded by donors. What do we see? Grants, donor-funded grants are providing funding up to some point along the pipeline. If it is a scholarship, the student is funded to do research, finish, graduate, do a paper. The same thing with the researchers. Hardly do you see grants with funding to go on to commercialize. In fact, if you look at the projects or the programs which are within the IUCA, the ACE, the ESTRIP, our colleagues in Forum, and the others, and there are many others, we don't see among the reporting metrics IP or startups or jobs created from this as part of the key metrics for reporting. And I think this would be a good point, to push this. If we can include them in terms of reporting. It would be very good if those who are funding research consider including an element to take this further, whatever comes from research, to take it further to IP, protection and commercialization, because sometimes we see good ideas or good products are coming out, but they stall because of lack of funding. What I can say is institutions can also leverage their internal funding. In our case, we have the Vice Chancellor's research grant. We have, for example, the National Research Fund. It could leverage and provide specifically targeted, resources to enable IP commercialization. We've seen some, like the FCDO, from the UK aid, come with their research to commercialization program. They're already starting to help in that line. In terms of protection, the institution has a technology transfer office. We do provide filing, everything with the funding that comes to the payments of all the types of payments that Dr. Mokaji has referred to. The institution does do that. But what do we see? Some of our colleagues are preferring self-protection. They want to manage that privately. And occasionally you will even encounter a colleague who tells you, I have 3 or a number of patents under my belt. They are not commercializing them. They are waiting to, show them to the panel when they go for promotion or some other thing. And this is truly a loss to the institution as a country. One of the things I would like to say about the technology transfer office is the human resource component. My experience shows that it requires specific skills, and Dr. Mokaji has referred to that. Identifying IP, knowing how to negotiate it, engaging, the partners that you would enable commercialization is really a very specialized skill. But what do we see? The HR policy in many institutions do not recognize these specialist skills in terms of, how they are developed, how you provide the training, but also very importantly, once this capacity has been established, how do you ring-fence it so that it is not lost? Like, how do you transfer staff in or out of this office would be very important to consider. Finally, let me say, to enable this issue of protection in the university, we have worked with the Kenya Intellectual Property Office to train. We have about 30 of our staff trained in patent drafting, and hopefully they will enable that. Finally, on the issue of utilization, what we see as the most binding constraint is capital, because once the idea is there and it's refined, the owners of this IP need then to prototype and move it to market, and capital becomes really an issue. Currently, we work with our academic departments, but we need to do more. We need to do more in terms of enabling. The last point I would like to say is enabling our innovators as they transition from the protective environment of the incubation centers. We have talked a lot about establishing an industrial park, but part of the discussion we have had is, could there be a space like a tax-free area, maybe like these export processing zones, where they are sheltered a little bit as they mature and go on to grow their businesses? Otherwise, thank you. That is all for now.
Thank you very much, Professor Maina, for that input, and particularly you have made the emphasis on the need to continue to fund research to the level of commercialization, especially when we have projects that are funded externally, but also institutions to commit funds to that particular last part of the research process, and also the emphasis on skills enhancement for managers of IP offices in our higher education institutions. Thank you very much. for that input. Our last panelist is Dr. Amos Nungu. May I invite you now to make your reflection on the topic?
Good afternoon. I'm coming from the Tanzania Commission for Science and Technology. Among our functions is promotion and coordination of research, but also support technology development and transfer. So those two components very much they go or coincide with the creative ideas that the presenter talked about. But now look at the bigger picture in Tanzania. The presenter noted that in East Africa, only Uganda and Rwanda, they have the IP policy. Locally, we have the legal frameworks, because we have many acts, for example, but also we have institutional frameworks, which are supported by this legal framework. And yes, the IP policy, we have, it is almost the national one. And I think the same goes to the East Africa EASTICO, because now they are in the final stages of having the East Africa Science and Technology Council IP policy. So that the drive is there. So coming back to my core activities, as I said, we connect, support research and innovation. We've been supporting innovators in-house as well as, through the universities or higher learning institutions. So we have innovators who coming with innovations. Two issues. As I said, we have the institutional framework. So patent, IP issues, we have the legal entity which are doing that one, but COSTECH is responsible to provide the awareness and the training, especially to the higher learning institutions, because until they are aware, so that they can go and, patent their work. Otherwise, it's business as usual. So we are currently having a program with the WIPO, the World International Property Organization, where we are supporting starting of the TISC, Technology and Innovation Service Centers. So far, we have about 41 managers in 41 higher institutions who have come up. So that we have support in each institution for the awareness as well as initial support. We wish to have the TTO tech transfer officers, but it's a process. At least we've started with the TISC. But one thing which I always tell, our innovators, especially the innovators, as the point said, you have to identify, protect, then utilize. But the innovations, sometimes we need to solve the problem of now. So sometimes there's a balance pursuing the protection versus going to the market. Because if it is innovation, and as our colleague from Rwanda said, you go to Rwanda, you go to Kenya, you find the same solution. They are both either in exhibition or in the market. It depends, how much innovation is on that solution on one hand, but also the protection part before the utilization. Because, as I said, it can take up to 3 years to get the IPR issues ready. But if it is an innovation which the market wants, while we are pursuing the protection, the other guys went to the market. After protection, when the market is already saturated. So sometimes there is a balance, how much is the invention or the innovation so that, I mean, if I patent, I can make more money than if I go straight to the market. So from my seat where I sit at COSTECH, the innovators, we usually assist them to go and patent. We support them to draft the documents, but at the same time, also we advise them after reviewing their innovation, if they discuss to us and advise. I mean, this one, the way we see it, just to go to the market and make a business. So that's, I mean, a thin line between when to protect and when to go straight and utilize your innovation. But looking at the bigger picture, yes, awareness is still very low in general. As much as I said, now in Tanzania, we're working with the WIPO, starting the TISC and creating the awareness, but more needs to be done. We are emphasizing that, I mean, each institution should have the local IP policy, but still it is work to be done because some of them, they're still waiting for the national IP policy before they can, I mean, make their own local IP policy. But as I've seen, I think we are moving and seeing the East Africa Technology Council is coming up with the IP policy for the East Africa. That one also will kind of fuel the local winning countries' IP policy, which in turn will kind of facilitate the institutional IP policies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amos, for that input, particularly the emphasis on the need to establish clear policies and guidelines for the protection of intellectual property and the need to create awareness among our stakeholders on the issues of IP so that the protection can be robust and based on knowledge. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, you will allow me now to open our discussion to the audience. We'll pick a few questions or comments. If you agree, we will take maximum of 6, 2 from this side, 2 from the middle side, and 2 from the last side. If there are any persons online, please let me know so that we can engage you in this conversation too. I will ask that you take maximum of 1 minute in making your question or statement. Let's start from here. We have 1 here and second person there. And here we have 1 here, the lady and the gentleman. I'm taking lady and gentleman, lady and gentleman. And on that side, do we have 2? We have 1, yes. Do you have the second one? So we'll have 3 people from this side. Oh, thank you. The last person over there. So can we start from here? The microphone. Will you try to use the microphone in front of you? Let's try.
Is it on?
Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Titus Ngatia. I'm the director, Effortless Insight Africa, based in Nairobi. And may I, of course, appreciate Dr. Sodin Mokaje for that very enlightening session. In my view, before I go to my question, I'd like to highlight that the fact that we are discussing this IP within the context of the 4th industrial revolution, it is important and incumbent upon us to realize that this 4th industrial revolution, which builds up from the 3rd, you know, the first one used water and steam power to mechanize production. The second one used electricity to do mass production. The third one built on electricity and IT to be able to do automation of production. And now we're talking about the fourth. So the distinct aspect of this fourth industrial revolution is that it's a total departure from that linearity as we started from the first, second, and third, and fourth. And so therefore, to me, the discussion around IP is such a core discussion for all our governments in Africa, such that all the innovation that we are doing now is such a quantum leap, because in the 20th century, it took companies up to 25 years to achieve a unicorn status that is being valued at $1 billion. Right now, their companies are being launched and they're achieving a unicorn status in less than 6 months. In other words, being valued at $1 billion. So it means to me that if we are not serious about IP, we will end up having all our innovations by our young people in Africa owned by other parties. So my direct question to Dr. Bertin was that we need to, I would like you to share, for instance, for the sake of maybe governments and also organizations, where is this central place that is agreed upon at a multilateral level where we can do the patent search, and it is authoritative and respected? I think it would be good for you to clarify, but a very enlightening conversation. Thank you so much, panelists.
Thank you. Can we have the lady over there? Just turn on the microphone in front of you.
Thank you so much for such an elaborate discussion. My name is Katuchi Kasandi. I'm the Director of Invention Education Partnerships at RISE 360 Institute for Global Health Technologies. Thank you so much, Dr. Mwakaje, for such a good, such an insightful session on IP policies. So one of the things that you mentioned during your presentation was that a lot of the institutional IP policies in the region are anchored on the national IP policy. And we know that changing policies at a national level requires a lot of it requires a very long parliamentary process. So what would you advise universities to do in terms of navigating some of that national IP policy at the institutional level, especially if it's not aligning to the place where they are in terms of how they want to support technology and innovation within the institution? And then lastly, you talked about when it comes to negotiating for IP policies, we need a very specialized skill set to facilitate this. So in your experience, is there a repository in terms of professionals or legal practitioners across the region that you could direct the audience to, especially if there's an institution or a university that wants to really invest in that kind of resource within their institution? So thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we come to this side? Yes, we start with the lady.
Thank you very much, presenter, chair, and panelists. I'm Professor Mauda Kamatene Sumijisha. I'm from Uganda, the chair, Council, Kampala International University. But formerly for the last 10 years, I've been the Vice Chancellor at Bishop Stuart University in Uganda. I would like to say that the issue of IP is very dear to us, and particularly as developing countries, and most so when it comes to indigenous knowledge. I'm a researcher in indigenous knowledge, traditional medicine. We find this knowledge is owned by a group, community, or even country, or even beyond the region. But this knowledge is not protected. And I don't see the deliberate move to have this knowledge well protected and utilized. You had the COVIDX story yesterday. And I want to say Professor Guang is here. He knows very well that we have been like previously we were supplying him materials, raw materials for making COVIDX in our oil extraction unit, which is a food grade unit that was donated by World Bank. However, the practitioners are not protected. The owners of the knowledge, they are not benefiting. And in equitable sharing of resources, we need to think about the traditional herbalists, the owners of this knowledge. So I think it is high time we give this due deliberate attention, not only in medicine, in agriculture, in our traditional equipments or implements. There is a lot of money that is utilized right now, but we need it protected. 2, building capacities for institutional IPs. To me, I think that is very important. Actually, as council, would love to know the IP policies that are available on access to benefit sharing, the model that is working for countries. We all talk about it, but there's nobody who's giving us the model. Should it be 50-50, 60-40? Who should benefit, who should not benefit? And in what percentages? I think this is something that we need to really tackle. That's why you hear academicians are hiding their IPs. And in the long run, for fear of registering a patent, they are trying to use it hidden and it is snatched. It's high time we really think of a model that works. Maybe this goes to Inter-University Council of East Africa. Think through it. Let's have, like they will have done benchmarks, have a benchmark policy or benchmark paper that can be pushed and we all borrow from it. For institutions to borrow, for even individuals to know. Lastly, Kenyatta University, how do you supervise 10,000 graduate students? I think that is very good. How many staff do you have? And the competencies you have built around, it's good because we need more professionals on board, especially PhDs. But we need to know how you are doing it such that we see how best we can benchmark from you and how you supervise the students to finish and do research and publish. I thank you.
Thank you very much, especially for speaking for the indigenous people, the owners of a very vast amount of knowledge that is used in our researches. Let me take the second question on this side. Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. My name is Julius Churu. I'm head of BioInnovate Africa at APPPF in Nairobi, Kenya. My question is to Dr. Saudia and Professor Tachan and Professor Nungu. So I'm happy that the East African Commission for Science and Technology is doing the East African IP policy. And I think that will help the countries which do not yet have, and even those which have, to refine their own national policies. But my question is to Dr. Saudia, could you maybe educate us a little bit more about the benefit of having a national IP policy vis-a-vis or over and above what the legal framework already provides? Because you say we have the legal, the patents, the copyright, and so on. And I would also like to know from you whether the institutions, because Professor Nungu said the institutions in Tanzania are waiting for the national policy. My question is, do you think the institutions could work adequately with the existing legal framework to do their institutional policies, or should they actually wait for the national IP policy?
Thank you. Jonathan? Can someone take the microphone over there? In the meantime, let's ask the colleague to proceed. Okay, just go ahead. Dr. Jonathan.
Okay, I've seen from farmers' experiments where researchers do experimental research with farmers. And then immediately farmers realizes that the product is good. They start sharing the product. And at the end of the day, we can't even tell whether the product is coming from a researcher or not. Now, the question I'm asking Dr. Mokaje is, can we reverse by law so that this research is rewarded? Thank you.
Yes, you can. The next person there.
Yeah, thank you very much, Moderator. My name is Nelson Ijumba from Coventry University, Africa Hub in Kigali. I would like to thank first of all, the plenary session speaker, Dr. Saudin Mwakaje, for a very comprehensive presentation highlighting the challenges of IP protection, particularly for higher learning institutions. And some of the problems we've highlighted range from ignorance to lack of capacity and also lack of funding. I'm saying ignorance because sometimes researchers, they come upon something unknowingly, they start publishing, and once it becomes public knowledge, you can't protect it. And for them, it is lack of ignorance, lack of knowledge on how to handle. But among the things you mentioned about patent searches, patent protection, engaging with the patent lawyers, all these require funds, which in many cases, institutions don't provide sufficient funding. Now, as we know, fourth industrial revolution, our governments are promoting innovation for universities to make relevant research. My question is to Dr. Masharubu from the National Commission of Science and Technology in Burundi, Dr. Amos Nungu. What are your organizations, what are your governments doing to assist institutions, either directly or through a promotion with a collaboration with industry, to find enough funding to protect or to undergo those processes for IP protection or development? And in many cases, you find institutions, they are donor supported, which is not sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this question, both of you from the National Commissions for Science and Technology can respond to that. Let's take the last observation or comment or question.
Thank you a lot. My name is Joseph Nkata from Tanzania, and I have one question to Dr. Mwakaje, and the other is input. My question is, as long as protection of IPR is concerned, Dr. Mwakaje said that protection of IPR is territorial. There is no universal law which protects international intellectual property rights. So what if we as a region, we have a proper law to protect our IPR in the region? What if sometimes we try to invest outside the region, and you find those countries maybe to Asia countries or European countries, because we cannot operate to our laws. If we want to invest in a different region, we will operate to that laws of that country. So what if we find those laws is losing? What can we do to such environment? That is my question. And when it comes about my input, I want to put some comments on the issue of funding commercialization of the IPR. From my side, I think sometimes we lack fund to commercialize this research in IPR because of the profitability. Because people cannot invest, they cannot put their money on the findings which they cannot gain something. So the easiest way for private sector to put their money in this research finding and output is to make sure there is a profitability of that finding and so forth. And the other thing which we can do to make sure that we attract more funds to these findings is to make sure that we try to find the right people, because not everyone, for example, let's take an example, there is a rich people, their passion is in the health sector. So if people from the university go to that person and they have maybe it's they have a different finding from other sector, different from the health sector. It will be very difficult for that person to invest in that finding. So I think that is my inputs. Thank you a lot.
For that input, I would like to request the members of the panel to respond to those questions very specifically. And we shall start from the extreme end. Dr. Amos Nungu, you make your quick comments in response to some of the questions raised to you.
Yes, I mean, I will start with that not every research or innovation is patentable. Yeah. But specifically giving money to support research output, it is something we are striving to do, and we have started. But I think the picture or the issue is a bit not as we wish, but there is not much of the output that can be upscaled. Because our experience, I give you an example. Last year, we said we want to find only research results, upscaling them. We couldn't find much. That brought us back to, a learning and a drawing table that before we find the research in the first place, we have to see the bigger picture, that this research will come out with such output which could be upscaled. Otherwise, we find the research done, at the end there are papers, yes, there are outputs, but when you want now to upscale, they are not really kind of upscalable. That's why when I said that sometimes it is easier to go to commercial, to the market, if you have a product, then it's saying, now we want to patent this one because it doesn't meet the criteria. So now, starting this year, we have tried to redesign the way we put up calls. But otherwise, in Tanzania, we have, money is always not enough. But I would say the government is giving at least money to do research and fund innovation, and they go through COSTECH, and we are doing something, and I think we are on the right track.
Thank you. May I ask Professor Mwangi to respond?
Okay, thank you. I will take a minute to respond on this, but let me make a comment on the issue of funding. Where I come from, 95% or more of the research done is by donor-funded grants. It's very little research, which is funded from private sector. Increasingly, we see private sector is required to be a partner in research, but they are hardly putting in resources as we should expect. And so I think as we look at how do we fund the commercialization, that needs to be factored into. The issue of navigating IP policy at the institutional level. Looking at the IP Act in Kenya, there is a clause which says, if at the point of employment, the contract did not specify the staff would be doing research and innovation, that's when the IP belongs to the institution. There's some haze and lack of clarity there. And I think the legal people can help us to open up that space and use it more to attribute ownership of IP to the people who are actually doing the work. In terms of indigenous knowledge and its protection, what I would say is let the incubation centers and technology transfer offices in universities open up to also receive, submissions from the public and the communities around, so that indigenous knowledge or cultural heritage can also gain protection. Finally, the question of how we are managing these numbers. The first thing is to comply, because we have guidelines from the Commission for University Education on how many students each staff can supervise at any point in time. The other thing, and the university is complying with that. The other thing is the density of students varies in different schools. For example, we have a large number in business or education-related courses. The really heavy research-oriented disciplines are okay. The student populations are manageable. But the university also engages really many networks of partners, so we We are co-supervising with people in other universities. There are adjunct professors, and all this is contributing to capacity to support our large student population. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Professor Mashara.
Thank you. Let me comment on the questions raised by Dr. Julius Echuru on IP policies. I think that they identified the issues in terms of IP policies or IP offices, IP offices at institutional level constitute a pathway, an opportunity for collaborations. So we may think that direction to collaborate, to cooperate around those issues in order to come out with sustainable solutions aiming at promoting IP within institutions. From the question raised by the participant from Kigali, she wanted to know organizations which assist in IP management. At the country level in Burundi, as I said before, we have an office in charge of industrial property, which is part of IP. It is hosted by the ministry in charge of trade and industry. We have also another office in charge of copyright and quality rights within the ministry in charge of culture and sport. And in that regard also, and in respect of the Nagoya Protocol, in terms of benefit sharing from the use of genetic resources, we have the Burundi Environmental Authority, which also made an arrangement which led at the assignment, at the signature of a MOU, a memorandum of understanding between traditional healers and researchers in terms of sharing benefits arising the use of plant resources for many purposes, including, among others, agriculture, food, and traditional medicine. So I thank you. We have also, beyond Burundi, ARIPO at continental level, the African Regional Organization for IP, but at the same time, we need such organization at ESC level. We don't have such a regional at the East African region level to coordinate all IP issues. This is also another opportunity for the region. Also at global level, we have the WIPO, which also assists the countries in terms of IP management and to provide the policy orientation and the strategic objectives. I thank you.
Thank you very much. And since the ESC is already working on the policy, I believe the policy will have also designated units to handle these matters. Mr.
Yes.
Martin?
The name is Bertin. Thank you so much for the question asked by Titus about the patent database. The patent database that someone or inventor or innovator can use. Before I mention the WIPO data, I mean the databases, patent database, let me elaborate why it is important for doing patent search. The patent search is inspires the inventor, even if you are not going to start working on IP, but at least it's like if you are an author and you want to be inspired on the topics that you want to write on, you read. I think that's the fact. So it's the same case for patent search. I think it's even, we are now in an era where we need to start doing those exercises within the classrooms where university students, especially in engineering schools where they are, to start facilitating them, showing them how you do patent search, to see where, for those let me say, for instance, for those who are going to start to work on their projects in final years, it's very important to start exercising them with interacting patent database, because it will facilitate them to get to be inspired on the topics that they can do, and hence we will start to see more innovations coming from universities. So quickly, the patent database we have so far that I can recommend. We can recommend WIPO patent database. We have WIPO patent database, but also we have another database which is ALIPO, where you can find those innovations which are already registered. We have also Google patent database. I know everyone here can know Google Scholar. If you know Google Scholar, we also have Google patent database, where you go and write in Google patent database. Then you go to the Google storage of patents worldwide. So I think those are the database that I can recommend now. Let me also comment on the question from Professor, I think VC from Uganda about—
Professor Mauda, yes. Professor Mauda.
Yeah, about traditional medicine, which are not protected. Actually, sometimes it depends on the policy which the country choose to work to do, especially for medical inventions. We know that I'm really happy that you asked this question while we were from Uganda, but for your information, Uganda choose the same practice as that of South Africa and India, where medicines, inventions are not patented, meaning that they are free to use and to do reverse engineering about those products. So sorry for your country, it's the choice. But other countries, I think also in terms of traditional knowledge, we need to work, because normally traditional knowledge are protected as what we call sui generis protection. So, but they still need to be reinforced in terms of in practical way, because sometimes we see one type of traditional knowledge under copyright, then another one is under patent. So I think there is, I can come again to the point of having a harmonized system, because East Africa especially, we have a number of traditional knowledge inspirations from different countries. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And finally, let's get the input of Dr. Mwakanje.
Well, thank you. It's good that a number of questions have been addressed by my colleagues, but I'll also revisit some of these just to improvise to what my other colleagues have pointed out. I'll start with a question that was, I think, Asani pointing out on the institutional IP policy, that is very difficult to move the national IP policy, which I agree. I've been a member of the National Steering Committee for IP Policy in Tanzania for the past 8 years. They are still pushing the agenda to adopt the national IP policy. Then what the university should do in the absence of the national IP policy. I think my comment on this will be the institutions, be it universities or R&Ds, should not wait for the national IP policy. We have so many cases where universities have been setting the pace and influence the government to come up with the national IP policy. So that has been a case, for instance, in Tanzania, the University of Dar es Salaam, Sokoine University, Muhimbili University have got institutional IP policy, while we do not have the national IP policy. Of course, there is a downside of it because you don't have a single reference where you can have a policy guide in terms of the national direction. But nevertheless, it's advisable for the institution to pick up and come up with the institutional IP policy. Then when the national IP policy comes, maybe with a slightly different approach, then it will be easy to realign the institutional IP policy within the terms and context of the national IP policy. So that can be done. You may start with the guidelines, in some cases, even within the institutions to come up with a policy. There's a Senate, then you've got the council to come and approve this process. Then in some institutions, they start with the IP guideline, then you improve it into, or you elevate it or it into a status of a national IP policy. In terms of the supporting structure for negotiating the IP deals, we've got several. Quick one, I can advise you use the ARIPO platform, African Regional Intellectual Property Organization platform. They've got a special support program for institutions who want to establish the IP infrastructures, but also support in specific cases. And WIPO is another option, World Intellectual Property Organization. They've been supporting, and in fact, they are still supporting a number of initiatives which are taking place. Because the idea is to build capacity within the institutions, how you can set up a team which is competent, but that presume or presuppose that you have proper policy and the processes. So once you've done with all these policies and processes, you've got the IP audits, then the IP team will come, and each transaction may attract different membership depending on the context of the invention or the IP rights, which is the subject of a particular transaction. On traditional knowledge, one thing to add, there are lots of initiatives going on now within Africa. One example is the initiative under ARIPO, where you have the Swakopmund Mundi protocol on protection of traditional knowledge. And it's important to understand traditional knowledge with a broader perspective, not necessarily on traditional medicine. TK is a very broad subject. And one of the options, as my colleague has pointed out, you can go for a sui generis, a specific law. A country may enact a specific law with a specific criteria for protection, depending on the circumstances on how traditional knowledge is generated, how is kept, and how it can be transacted or shared, if we were to use this term. So the option is for countries to come up with a national law, or we can also emulate the protocol, which sets minimum or a framework through which national policies and laws may be built for the protection of TK. But I agree with you, this is one of the very important subjects which we should not underrate. But at least we see some initiatives which are ongoing within our continent. Then there was a question from Julia, thank you very much. The benefit of having national IP policy. One of the obvious benefits is that then you have what we call a national position or reference point or roadmap, because the policy sets broader theme and roadmap. And having the policy also creates what we call strategies and activities, which issues of awareness, institutional capacities will be addressed, and the capacity of regulatory authorities will be addressed. And maybe with the proper policy in place, it may also trigger legislative review, that we need to review our laws so that they are compliant with the best practices and the policy direction which our country wants to move on. So the current, in the absence of national IP policies, what the institutional IP policy does, they have to be compliant with the national law, because you cannot come up with a institutional policy which is in breach of the national law. So that is one of the very key checklists that make sure that you comply with the law. But it's very important for the countries to come up with a national law. We have to commend Kenya. By the way, they have IP as a constitutional right. I think within East Africa, it's the only country which their constitution specifically provide for the duty of the state to protect intellectual property. I think that is a very important benchmark. It sets a very important foundation for formulating other national initiative for the promotion and protection of intellectual property. Dr. Jonathan, I missed a little bit of your question, but what I gathered, if I got it right, that what can we do for those companies which have already been maybe trading without protecting the IP? Can we reverse the bylaw or the legislation? It all depends on the type of IP we're talking about. I know a number of companies which are already selling their product without protecting patents or trademarks. We've been advising them, you have got to check whether in the registry there is already another proprietor who have registered. As I have said, intellectual property operates on the basis of first come, first served. So in some cases, if they are lucky enough, they may find in some cases the IP right is still available. But in some cases, they may find it's already taken by another company. Then maybe they have to negotiate how they are going to coexist in the market. And those which are already available, they can take prompt action to protect. Finally, the issue of territoriality. This is one of the pillars of intellectual property system, because the IP system is built on certain fundamental principles, and one of the principles is territoriality. It comes out of what we call appreciating and recognizing sovereignty of countries in terms of deciding how best they can protect intellectual property within their system. Now, we have international conventions, international treaties, which set what we call minimum standards of compliance. So in the current setup, it is very unlikely to find significant disparity of national laws, because most of the countries are either members to WTO, where we've got TRIPS agreement with the minimum standards to comply in terms of laws and policies, and WIPO, which encourage, as part of the rule making, to encourage countries to enact laws which are compliant with the minimum standards which are set by the national by international agreement or international conventions. So in case there is a weak regulatory framework, which we all agree, I know I don't want to mention some countries, because as IP practitioners, I operate practically in the entire continent in Africa. And we know in some countries that the IP system is very fragile in terms of protection. Then you have to be cautious how you operate in that market, given the fact that enforcement registration process is still not strong enough. Well, then those are the strategic decisions which I mentioned, which need to be looked at. The final thought, which I think is important we note as a matter of awareness, that in Africa, we have two important organizations ATZ stands for IP, ARIPO and OAPI. OAPI for French-speaking African countries. We are still segmented based on our colonial connections. Now, the framework which is operating under OAPI is different from ARIPO, because OAPI is a single territory. All countries which are member to OAPI, then you get a single application, single protection. It's different from ARIPO. For more technical explanation in terms of how this operates, Professor, they may consult with me on a bilateral arrangement.
Thank you very much. We shall charge you a fee for advertising. Thank you. I think that's a very important compliment he's giving to us, that if we have critical issues to do with the IP, we can consult him. Doctor, I would like to thank you very much for that offer to protect intellectual property within our region. Thank you very much for the service that you are rendering to the region. And I think when we also, as IUCN, start the process of developing the framework for institutional IP audits and other key components, we shall consult you people in that particular process. So ladies and gentlemen, join me to thank our team of eminent panelists for the work that they have excellently executed this morning and afternoon. Thank you very much, Asanteni Sana, for the input and for the great work that you are doing in your respective countries and jurisdictions. Thank you very much. You may take now leave as we come to the next part of our session. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
I will talk to you.
All right. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
May I take this?
Thank you.
And there was one question online which we didn't check it.
We recognize that a question came online a little bit later, but we have taken note and the appropriate response will be given, especially the commissioner from the National Council for Science and Technology, Tanzania, will be able to respond to that appropriately. Thank you very much. May I take this opportunity to invite the manager of the event, Dr. Aine Robert, to come and lead us in the final phase of this important activity, Academia Public-Private Partnership Forum 2023. Dr. Aine.
Can we clap for Professor Mawa? We started on a very high note. We're going to end also on a high note. And I want to thank you so much for that second last session. And now we're moving to the last bit, and it's on way forward and closure. Ladies and gentlemen, this particular bit, we are honored that it will be moderated by Professor Idris Rai, who is our Deputy Executive Secretary. Can we clap for him as he takes the center stage? Professor Karibu.
Thank you, Robert. I'll recognize the chairperson of the executive committee of IUCEA, the members of executive committee, some principal secretaries present, partners and participants. We are now approaching the end of our forum. And if you still have the booklet of the program, you will see that it's the executive secretary was supposed to be here officiating this closure. I mean the way forward, sorry. He would love to be here with you, but unfortunately he had to travel to attend some other matters in Arusha. So he apologizes that he had to delegate it to me to finalize this final session. So I'll be on my own, moderating and also concluding a little bit. So we had 8 sessions in the whole forum. Yes. We had the opening session by our Minister of Education, Science and Technology, Honorable Professor Adolf Mkenda. It was very lively, engaging. And then throughout the forum, we had 8 plenary presentations and 7 panel sessions. They were all very engaging. We started with a number of dignitaries from different institutions. One of the important ones arrived today, not too late, is the Principal Secretary, Minister of Education, Kenya. You may want to stand so that people recognize your presence, please. We are honored that she came. She didn't come too late. There's still a room for contribution, and we'll seek for your contribution before we end today. So I'd like to summarize with 3 observations. These are personal observations, but I believe you'll agree with me that they are the right observations. One, if you recall on the old session that we had, I think we had a very good set of well-chosen speakers and presenters. They did a very good job. They were experts on their own right. And they were not selfish in sharing whatever lessons they had to share with us. The presentations and discussions perfectly fit within the theme of this forum. I think we all agree on that observation. And we'd like to thank you for their contribution, for their responding to the call and presenting to this forum. Thank you so much. There's another observation that I've observed here. I've been attending these forums before. I think I've attended 2. This is I think 3. This is the 4th one. I've observed a number of actors, emergency of a number of actors who are actively engaged in skills development and technology transfer. The space was not like this 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago. I think we've all seen them. We've seen a number of initiatives emerging from higher education institutions, universities, private sectors, non-governmental development partners. So in all, I think there's a growing interest in changing the course on how universities engage in delivering knowledge to the youth. How universities are engaged in interacting with the private sector. I think this was obvious here. But another observation coming from that second observation is there has been a number of best practices and experience shared by speakers. But also I should recognize participants as well, who have been very enthusiastic throughout the course of this forum. They always wanted to contribute and share best practices and comment on the ideas presented here. We value your contribution, we value your presence, and we say thank you so much. Now we are in the last session. We are closing soon. As I highlighted, all sessions were important, all sessions were useful, all sessions were perfect to the theme of this forum. I think this is also, although there's no panel here or there's no plenary presentation, but I think it's one of the most important sessions. We've talked a lot. We've said too much. But after this forum, what are we going to do? If we only talk and we find nothing to do that will enable us to move from where we are to where we want to be, I think the objective of the forum will not be achieved. So this is one of the most important sessions. We haven't finished yet. If you're sleeping, please wake up. Yeah? We still need your contribution and your participation in this particular session. So the objective of the session, as you can read in the program, also was introduced by MC, is to chart on the way forward. The way forward that we believe will enable us to move the region from where it is today to where we want it to be. We want to have a region that has skilled youth base that will contribute effectively and meaningfully in the development economy of the region, but also in the world, because we're not in isolation anymore. Every part of the world is connected to the rest of the world. So this is what we are going to do. We had a team of rapporteurs who collected views, ideas, and observations that presenters as well as the participants aired in different times. We have a summary or draft communique. Communique, it's a French word, I think, but communique. But we believe you might have missed some of these ideas. And as you can see, the last session just ended and we had a draft before the last session. So definitely we did miss. It's a draft with some ideas of observations, commitments, and recommendations that we should all agree on. So that when we leave here, each actor should know what they're supposed to do. When we meet after 2 years, the first thing I told my colleagues is to present what we have implemented after this particular forum. So we'll present the draft for you to see, to view, and then to see what is missing within that particular draft. And then after presentation, I'll offer opportunities for some other participants present to also add to what we have presented in terms of resolutions of this forum. So you'll see what is missing. You will give you an opportunity to air some of your ideas. We note them so that we can compile the final set of resolutions that we all agree that the resolutions of this forum for this year. So with that, I'll invite PSs, permanent principal secretaries present. Also, I'll invite participants who will have some ideas not mentioned by PSs, but won't be available, won't be seen within the draft that will be presented here. Now, we don't want to give new presentations and plenaries, so please, when you get that opportunity, mention just 3, not more than 3 points. I believe, give other opportunities. So identify 3 points that you think they are missing in the draft, but they are important. Maybe they were mentioned or they were not mentioned during the forum. So my team will note and compile so that you give others opportunities to present as well and finish on time. Now, what we're going to do next is to compile those ideas, share with members present and other stakeholders, and implement for those that fall under IUCER. But for those that fall to other actors who are here present, we will also, require that they also take action on those resolutions. Now, with that, I'd like to invite Dr. Meshach Obonyo, who was the head of repertoire team, who will present a set of resolutions that we already compiled. As I said, it's a draft. He will read them aloud. Please take note and make sure that you add anything that we are missing from this draft that we have. Thank you very much. Dr. Professor Obonyo, please welcome.
So, good afternoon. As has been said, we are a team of 2. I'd like to recognize my co-rapporteur, Mr. Alex from TCU. Oh, I'd like to recognize Mr. Alex from TCU. So we are a team of 2. So sometimes 2 people, 4 eyes, so maybe 4 years could miss something. So feel free to contribute, as Professor Rai has said. So allow me to present what we have. We call it the communique. The 12th Academia Public-Private Partnership Forum held at Julius Nyerere International Convention Center, Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, 15th to 17th March. The 12th Academic Public-Private Partnership Forum convening on 15th to 17th March at Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, under the theme Nurturing Sustainable Skills Development for Graduate Employability, notes and appreciates the effort, commitment, and determination of the IUCER, Inter-University Council, through engagement with strategic development partners in fostering skills development. Further notes, further notes other ongoing initiatives by IUCER in addressing issues related to skills development, including the establishment of some of the initiatives, including centers of excellent projects, commends IUCER for conceiving and sustaining the Academic Public-Private Partnership Forum, acknowledges that the forum provides an opportunity for sharing issues of common interest for the EAC partner states, recognizes the need for EAC partner states to increase budget allocation to IUCER to sustain development of partner-funded projects relevant to skills development and academia industry engagement, recognizes the need for member states to develop national policies to facilitate academia industry partnerships and bilateral engagement with development partners, calls upon universities to come up with new strategies that will enable them to establish strong partnerships with the public and private sector in order to produce the skills required by the labor market. Realizes that there is a paradigm shift in terms of educational pedagogy from lecturer-centered to learner-centered, recognizes the commitment by the EAC partner states to human capital development for economic growth of the EAC region, acknowledges the role of the private sector in provision of education and leveraging the government investment in the education sector, upholds the need for academia, public-private partnership in policy reforms, appeals for IUCER to take lead in the internationalization of universities in the EAC region through regional integration mechanisms, calls for the government in the EAC region to continue supporting the ongoing initiatives by employer organization and private sector that contribute to skills and human capital development by funding entrepreneurship and innovation initiatives, calls upon establishment of strong academia, public-private collaboration partnerships that embrace apprenticeship and internship programs, appreciates the opportunities emanating from the use of ICT and the potential benefits accrued from the digital economy, considers the need to revisit the business process related to the accreditation of academic programs in order to keep pace with the new developments and cope with the labor market demands, admits that there is a need for continuous updating of curricula to cope with the changing labor market demands, upholds that the academia needs to reach out to the industry through different engagements, notes that some of the private firms are ready and willing to collaborate with academia, considers that there is a need to think about new ways that would provide incentive and encourage academics to participate in the government business or processes and add value to the economy, calls upon universities to provide conducive governance and structural environment to streamline industrial engagement, establishment of incubation centers and innovation hubs leading to business spin-offs, calls upon universities to encourage academicians to develop enterprises through knowledge transfer and commercialization, acknowledges that commercialization of research output should take into account the societal environment, appreciates the importance of technology transfer and intellectual property rights, considers that for effective academia public-private partnership, there is a need for a clear definition of the roles and contributions of different stakeholders, cautions that successful strategic partnership should be guided by institutional, national, and regional policy framework, considers that the research conducted by academic staff should inform and guide what they teach students, and notes and appreciates the various business and trade opportunities that countries in the region can tap into based on the strategic position of the continent in the world. Urges IUCEA to incorporate relevant experience learned and best practices from the implementation of development partner funded projects into its policies or operation of its core business. Urges IUCEA, in partnership with relevant stakeholders, to take lead in development of conducive regional-based policy frameworks and strategies to facilitate effective industry academia, partnership, and technology transfer. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Meshach. So, as I suggested now, we've seen what the rapporteur compiled as resolutions. I think these are not all. We might have missed some. So now is the time for permanent and principal secretaries to help, to show us a way. It could be a form of commitment of the government. Could be a form of reminding us what to do, and other actors and so on and so forth. So I'll need someone with mics. And no one wants a mic today. Yeah, okay. And it's not working. Oh, the mic's on the table, but there's no mics on the front there. And some pieces are there. That doesn't work. Okay. Yeah, so PS Burundi.
Thank you. The communique is well done, but I think there is a paragraph in which they mention that partner states would increase the participation in funds. I think it would be not done here, but in another occasion in which many partner states which have the force to take that decision would be invited. I would also to emphasize the recommendation of the last session in which they talked that other institutions of ESC in mainly on research, like health research, which is in Burundi, Victoria Vicrace, fishery, Isteco, and so on, would be involved in such forum in order to work closely and to continue to work, to continue to the collaboration between those institutions, because they have also some activities which are related to research and innovation. Thank you.
Thank you. You want to proceed? Representative of PS Uganda, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. PSs and their representatives, colleagues. I think just to, first of all, to thank the rapporteurs for a very great work in capturing the emerging issues that came through. I think there was an issue in the communique that talks about the business processes for accreditation. I'm not very sure if that captures the element that from what we had here, the regulatory authorities that accredit need to allow plenty of innovation in the programs. You know, when we had the COP education here and a number of other, I think we need to see how we ensure that we capture that. And then the other one, Chair, as you indicated, this was just in the last session, but I think one of the panelists here challenged or encouraged us to ensure that when we are looking at funding for research, to ensure that it doesn't just stop at producing research results, but also going through to IP, looking at jobs created and the commercialization. I thought that was a great idea. And finally, Chair, I think that the 12th IPPF definitely commends the government and people of the United Republic of Tanzania for a great hospitality accorded to us during our time here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you a lot. No one is carrying the mic, huh? Ah, you're there. Another PSDRC? PSDRC representative? Yes.
Bonjour, dames et messieurs.
Bonjour.
Dès le début, j'avais informé à l'organisation.
From the beginning, I've informed the organization.
Notre souhait de voir ces travaux bénéficier des services de traduction.
Yeah, I think it's about this work should benefit the translation services.
Étant donné que le principe de statut bilingue de cette organisation était déjà levé. C'était une option levée que nous travaillons en format bilingue.
I'm missing some beats. My French is not perfect, so anyone can help us translating? Javet? How are you? I thought I speak French very well. Huh? I didn't know that I'm struggling.
Yes, Professor.
J'étais donc en train de dire que une option était déjà levée, que nous puissions travailler en format bilingue.
Yeah, so he's saying that now that, you know, Congo is now a part of EAC. So the fact that this is now an IUCEA, by dint of that, it should have the bilingual status or multilingual status. So French should be part of it. It's one of what should be noticed.
Voice.
Oh yeah, I'm saying that he's saying that now that with the new status, you know, Congo joined us in the EAC. So even in the next conference, you should factor in the French aspect. So therefore, the translation services ought to be there. Okay.
Et donc, en ce moment où nous sommes en train de chuter par rapport à ces travaux, je ne voudrais pas donner une mauvaise note à tout ce qui s'est passé ici.
At this moment that we're just about to conclude, he wouldn't want to have a negative comment on all that has gone on up to now.
Cependant, je reste convaincu que l'intégration des universités de l'ensemble de nos pays de l'Afrique de l'Est est une nécessité et même une obligation.
However, he notes that the integration of our universities within the community, the East African community, working together is not only a great idea, but it's now an obligation.
Mais marcher ensemble veut dire aussi se comprendre. Marcher ensemble veut dire aussi se comprendre.
Yeah, he also says that it needs to be understood that we also need to move together, moving forward.
Et je suis sincère en disant que beaucoup des choses qui ont été dites ici, moi, je les ai entendues, mais je ne les ai pas comprises.
Yeah, so you got that right. So he, of course, he had a lot of great speakers who he listened to, but obviously he couldn't understand.
Yeah.
He's saying it sincerely.
Finalement, j'ai difficile au regard de ce communiqué final de réagir de manière utile.
Yeah, finally, looking at this communique that you just shared, he may not be able in a very comprehensive way to give additions.
Je crois en toute votre bonne foi d'être arrivé à des conclusions utiles pour tous.
He has firm faith in or belief in your good faith that you had good intentions for all.
Mais pour que ceci nous serve à nous, Congolais, parlant français, il est impérieux, je dis bien impérieux, que des textes français nous soient également donnés pour que nous allions les implémenter dans ce qui se fait chez nous et ce que nous pourrions également ramener dans la sphère des universités de l'Afrique de l'Est.
He says that it is essential that even that particular document, for instance, ought to be, the text should be availed in French so that then once he exits or the Congolese delegation exits here, they are able to share that and all the universities in Congo are able to partake and add value to it.
Pour finir, je vous remercie de nous avoir associés ou invités à ces travaux et vous assurons de notre engagement à marcher aux côtés de nos amis et frères des universités de l'Afrique de l'Est. Merci.
Merci. In conclusion, he would like to thank you so much for having associated Congo with this event and assures the forum and IUCA that they will work with you side by side moving forward. Thank you.
OK, merci beaucoup pour cette intervention. We were not prepared. How do you say we were not prepared, unfortunately, for translation in this particular event, but we understand. Yeah, you will translate. We understand it's an obligation to do it.
Chef, monsieur, il dit que il n'y avait pas de préparation.
Malheureusement.
Malheureusement, mais l'intention est là et peut-être la prochaine fois, on va noter tout ça.
As everybody understands, DRC is a new member, just came in, so we are still used to the old way of doing our things. So it's important that he raised it in a very good faith to remind us what to do next time.
Le monsieur beaucoup apprécié, il a beaucoup apprécié le commentaire que vous avez donné et la prochaine fois, c'est noté.
Okay, merci beaucoup. Merci.
Merci.
Yes, PS Kenya.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And I would like to take the same opportunity to thank the men and women of Eminent seated here for the last 3 days and doing a very Good job. I apologize, I couldn't have been here earlier. My colleagues who prepared this would really have wanted that, but the space where I sit, it's difficult to really be able to do that. And you, like you can see, we are still consulting because there are still things that need to be done. It's not very nice for the forum, but that again explains why I couldn't have been here longer for this very important engagement, because even from the community, thank you very much, Obonyo, for that with your colleagues. It's really very good, well flowing summary of what has been going on, and I really feel engaged, married into it. So thank you very much. I wouldn't therefore pretend that I would have much more to add, but I think when the eminent speakers sat at the front, somebody came up with a very something that I thought was very important. I'm not very sure, Bonyo, we were able to capture it, that negotiation skills, entrepreneurship skills, HR skills need to be brought into the space, because I think I have been in the university space for a long time, because before I came to this new space, and I know I do not think we are short of innovations. I do not think so. Out here, now I am in this space and I've still been able to see enough innovations, including the ones outside here today. So where and which is the glass ceiling that we need to break to be able to take these innovations that we have seriously, pragmatically, and apologetically to the next space. We need to look for that. We need to look for that upward space that we need and we must be into. So we need to have a candid conversation about a much more candid conversation about really upscaling our innovations, because I think we have enough of them. And then we need, I think, multilateral and policy discussion across our countries. I did not even know that now our brother was sitting here and not able to converse freely with us. So I think we in Africa just operate in spaces where we are still, where I cannot come to Tanzania without feeling like somebody will say, oh, this one is a Kenyan. Then I go to the other side, Uganda. A long line is at the border waiting to be allowed into Uganda. I mean, when are we going to break these barriers? How long is it going to take us? Because when we have the political barriers, they go down into the academic productions that we have. So I'm very happy when we can talk about moving academia into the entrepreneurship space. And Professor Maina, I know they've been doing a lot of work at KU. Professor Maina, I came from JKUAT, and I know in KU they have been doing a lot of work at an innovation center that they have. So we are good at the space. We are quite good at the space where we are. So we need only to improve a few spaces. I am not in any way saying that I am an expert, but I'm just saying that we need to, as far as IP policy and legal frameworks that exist, I think this is something we have talked about and been able, yes, you recognize to do quite a lot, even from the time, because I know it's going on, even when I was in the university space. But you see, it's not enough to have that done in Kenya, and we think we are safe. You know, we need to be more broad so that we can be able to develop as a region and in the African space. Without saying too much more, let me say, I think this has been a beautiful forum from what Obonyo has outlined. And I am sure that even my colleagues from TVET sector department would have wanted to be here much more. And personally, I think it would have also benefited me as a person if I was here much longer. And I look forward to another forum where we can be able to engage. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Esther Moria. PS representative, Tanzania. You'll come here. Okay, you don't want this, okay. So I think we don't have PS from South Sudan and Rwanda. If representatives are here, let me know. I think we haven't seen them. So now we give opportunities for anyone with some burning recommendations, observations, ideas related to our resolutions. You can raise your hand, but I start with Simon here. Before I go to Vice Chancellor KIU, Simon is here. From GIZ Partners.
Thank you very much for volunteering me, Professor Rai. Good afternoon, everyone. And I would like to start to congratulate IOCR and the organizers for this conference and for compiling this communique after 3 days of, and you said it, a lot of talking. So we are looking forward now, and maybe this is not as a feedback to the communique, but as a commitment that we are looking forward as GIZ to work together with IOCR in our streams of work to contribute and to support academia-industry collaboration. This morning, we have just signed our new implementation agreement for an additional support of 2.5 million euros that was committed by the German government, and GIZ is implementing together with IOCR. So that is, I think, what I can say for now. And thank you also very much for having us.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Vice Chancellor, can you take the mic? Someone? Vice Chancellor KIU, she's got the mic. Yes, please.
Yeah, Chairperson and colleagues, I would like actually to express my sincere thanks to the panel and all the discussions that they put up. And there is one thing that I wish to underline, that there is no doubt that in the near future, the private sector is actually to be sitting on the driving seat for development in the region. And that is unavoidable. It is good. But there is one observation that the communique actually brought in, and I would like to see that expanded or elaborated once a little bit more. That they said some of the private sectors are actually not joining hands in allowing the students to actually get the skills that they require. That being the case, and given the fact that in the near future, the private sector is going to take the lead role, I would like also to see added next to that particular statement that mechanisms are actually being thought of encouraging the private sector to accept the students for their field work. I have gone into experiences where some of the private sector actually did not accept the students to take the skills that they require. So please consider putting in some statements to say that we are encouraging the remaining private sector to accept the students to acquire the skills that they require.
Thank you very much. That's noted. A mic here, please. Yes, you can talk with the mic on the table if it's on.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Professor Gwang Patrick from Uganda. I want to say that in East Africa or Africa as general, we have very weak private sector, especially those owned by indigenous people. Most of the private sector in Africa is the strong ones are owned by foreign agencies. They bring in foreign technology and such outputs. And therefore, for us to realize what we have been discussing the past 3 days, governments must also invest in indigenous private sector to develop. Some countries have developed because their government put money in private sector, set up industries and factories, and this can work together with the universities. A Chinese said one time that universities should increase at the same rate as industries. If you have one increasing and the other not increasing, you're going to have a problem. In Africa, we have universities increasing, but industry not increasing. So we don't have jobs being created. But for industry to increase, government must also invest money in private sector. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. There's another participant here, and then we go to the other side.
Thank you very much, Chair. And compliments to the good communique. I am Professor Peter Wanderi from Mount Kenya University. I acknowledge the presence of my Vice Chancellor, Professor Deogratius Jagani. And in consultation, although we never got a chance to say this earlier on, allow me, Chair, to announce that the communique we have had is very good, only that maybe an aspect of internalization of our joint endeavor is very important.
Internalization?
Internalization. We are in a global village, and we may not do a lot as East African community without reaching out to the internal, external factors.
Okay.
And therefore, my input through the Vice Chancellor that we have consulted with is that this is a point to go to all universities, and it maybe should be passed to them through your good office. The United Nations in New York have opened since 2018 a platform for every university to reach out to an international partner, or rather to internalize its endeavor through registering on what they call United Nations Academic Impact. This is very important in United Nations Academic Impact. That office provides a free of charge platform to every university to register, and they are certified. And every 3 years, they look through the registered of universities and appoint one to stand in as a hub for one of the 17 SDGs. As we speak, I'm happy to indicate that, and I'm saying this on behalf of our university, and the Vice Chancellor is here, that Mount Kenya University is the SDG number 10 on reduced inequalities hub for the 3 years since 2021 to next year. And the universities will have that opportunity once they register with the United Nations.
Thank you very much. Thank you, and congratulations for the achievement. There's another one there. Will that be the last one? Okay. Okay. Fine.
Thank you very much, Chair. I am the president of the East African Higher Education Quality Assurance Network. So I speak. Thank you, Chair and members. I am the president of the East African Higher Education Equality Assurance Network. We also thank the organizers for everything, the sequencing, the logic, etc. So I just wanted to contribute on us reflecting on the exhibition. Maybe it is implied, but I didn't see it. And therefore that one will give room for how better do we have the exhibition.
Okay.
in the next forum, or if we are going to have like mini exhibitions leading to the forum.
Okay.
And then the other one, there are several mentions in terms of work to do. I would urge that we take care of using either enhancement or updating or development. For instance, where we say that countries should develop some policies, we have to be aware that, maybe they are there, but they need to be updated. We are not starting from scratch.
Okay.
Then, in terms of the partnerships, today I learned something that when we think of the public-private partnership, even myself, I used to think of those huge projects, but today someone simplified it. Those interventions that enable a youth to even, take forward his or her venture. And again, today's higher level breakfast with partners. So here, my suggestion is us actually enabling two things: a database of potential partners for the different sectors, for the different segments, because higher education leads to different sectors of life. And then finally, the mapping out, the mapping out of potential stakeholders. I know the IUCA, you will have the partners, but again, the institutions and also the industry, it is if there could be some mechanisms to have a database, yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now there are last two hands. I think one hand there, that'll be the last one, and then we'll go to the closure. Thank you very much for the last comment.
Hello. Thank you very much. My name is Jean Bosco Mugemana. I am a director of a consulting firm based in Dar es Salaam. We are called APPPPF Group Limited. We focus on helping small enterprises, helping people to get jobs. We are an official recruitment agency, and we also provide soft skills training. I was very much satisfied by the content of this forum. What I would like to recommend is, if we are talking about partnership between private, public, and academia, in the next forums, please look at inviting also the private sector in good numbers, so that the dialogue can be a true dialogue, after which resolutions can be taken and put into action. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I don't know the ratio of people invited vis-a-vis academic and private sector, but I think if we reflect to the presenters, I think there was a huge presentation of the private sector. I think organizers will know, but I think we take a note of that recommendation. And if it was done otherwise, it's not by design. It's, I think we want as private sector to be here as much as academia, as far as the theme and the goal objectives of this platform, forum is concerned. So that is well noted. And we appreciate that you raised it to us. Now, to finish for today, I would like to invite the representative of Principal Secretary of Ministry of Education, Science and Technology, United Republic of Tanzania, to come and give his closing remarks. Now, before I give you the mic, we'd like to appreciate your support. Everybody who is here, I think, is happy that they are in Tanzania. They love being in Tanzania. And I think if you ask them, when do you want it to be next time, they might say Tanzania, but maybe the other side of Tanzania, maybe Zanzibar. Yeah. So thank you very much for the support for the organization. And also thank for the minister for opening, and as well as for you being present with us. Thank you and welcome. Yeah.
Good afternoon. After listening the contributions from principal secretaries across East African region, I find out that the speech which was prepared for the permanent secretary from Tanzania has been preempted. But for the matter of protocol, I will share with you the speech from the permanent secretary of the United Republic of Tanzania, representative of the Secretary General of the East African Community, principal secretaries of education in East African region here present, the World Bank country director representative, the representative Federal Republic of Germany, Professor Kalis Kabera, the chairperson of the USEA governing board and the members of the governing board, Professor Gaspard Banyankimona, the executive secretary in the University Council for East Africa, Mr. John Bosco Kalisa, the executive director, East African Business Council, vice chancellors of public and private universities here present, principals, rectors, directors of technical and vocational educational institutions here present, chief executive officers of private companies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon again. In the first place, let me thank God for keeping us healthy and making our 3 days forum on nurturing sustainable skills development for graduate employability such a great opportunity for sharing our varied experiences and the perspectives for improved provision of competence-based education. I am sure your stay in this haven of peace has been enjoyable and motivating. Ladies and gentlemen, I feel greatly honored to grace the official closing of the 12th Academia Public-Private Forum and exhibition on behalf of the Permanent Secretary, Minister of Education, Science and Technology from the United Republic of Tanzania. As the United Republic of Tanzania, we are honored to host delegates from all over East Africa and beyond during this important forum. Since the forum of this kind is held on a rotational basis, I believe that the next rotation we will be joining our colleagues in another East African country. And in this way, this forum plays a vital diplomatic role as it strengthens our East African integration in all spheres of life. And thus, I would like to commend the organizing team for the wonderful job making the forum effectively and efficiently conducted. Going through the statements and the keynote speeches from different invited partners and the dignitaries, as well as fruitful submissions and the discussions of sub-themes, it is quite clear that sustainable skills development for graduate employability will only be achieved when there is a well-established public-private partnership for the drive of development agenda amongst East African member states. There is no doubt that a strong private sector is a strong foundation and the backbone for our economic development. I stand to attest your deliberations that a strong higher education is important for research, catalyzing innovations, and consequently producing skilled human resources to support economic development and transformations. The public sector always existed to design and improve policies that ensure that all these sectors thrive. Many developed nations globally, such as the new industrialized countries, which include China, India, Brazil, Singapore, Malaysia, South Africa, Mexico, Indonesia, Korea, and Taiwan, just to mention a few, had invested much in education, especially on skills-based education, where the practical parts of teaching and learning takes a large percentage than the theoretical part. This forum has therefore been a very unique platform for various policymakers and practitioners to dialogue on how best the partnership between key higher education and the productive stakeholders can respond to the current and the future skilled human resource needs. Ladies and gentlemen, I am moved by the forum theme, nurturing sustainable skills development for graduate employability through academia-industry partnerships. This theme speaks a lot. There is no shortcut towards achieving the production of employability skills we want among graduates, unless employers across fields, across specializations, in this case, the labor industry, is fully engaged from curriculum preparations to implementation, then efforts to produce graduates with required employability skills will never be achieved. Besides research and in-house innovations, yet it is important to benchmark from the best practices globally to experience how the private sector, which is the main employer, is engaged in the provision of higher education. By so doing, I believe we can have the curricula we need and produce graduates who create employment opportunities and possesses the required employability skills. I am still convinced that to achieve this mission will depend on how the aspects of public-private partnership, sustainable skills development, and the graduate employability are cemented in practice. It is possible if we decide. Ladies and gentlemen, I understand that USEA team is working hard, creatively and innovatively to ensure university education in the East African region produce competitive graduates with adequate employability skills and contribute to the socio-economic development of the respective countries. Establishment and operationalization of centers of excellence in the region is just one of the efforts. I wouldn't like to take much of your time, but therefore I conclude my speech. Before I conclude my speech, I wish to advise you to strengthen in various ways the networks that you have created during your participation in this forum. I believe the forum has added your academia life experience, and where possible, it has necessitated you to take advantages of the many opportunities which you are not at your exposure before. I wish you a safe trip back home, and then with those remarks, I declare the 12th Academia Public-Private Partnership Forum and exhibition officially closed. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for the closing remarks. And I think I'm not supposed to be here now. This is closed. I'm standing between you and the lunch. And I think we stayed long without having the lunch itself. So I would like to invite MC if he has any announcements. And I would like to thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for participating. And on behalf of USEA, we wish you a safe journey back home, but you'll hear us now and then during the course of 2 years before we meet again. Thank you.